I know the impatience with which our people have now. And because of that, I have given instructions that all these corruption cases be heard on a day-to-day basis until they are finished. So when our hearing starts, it will be heard today, tomorrow, continuously until they are finished. Kwa hivyo naomba wananchi muwe na subra tafadhali, so that we if we send somebody to prison who has not been heard, that is already a miscarriage of justice. That's a miscarriage of justice. So those leaders who are talking and some going to the media saying these people should be sent to prison immediately and all that, please understand that the court doesn't work like that.
But also justice, it takes two to tango. When the corrupt are arrested and brought to the courts, make sure that your judges also hear those cases quickly and let them be punished properly. Sasa ile ameleta kwa kotini sasa hiyo mawakili karibu 100 who are there. They all first just bail. Bail is a constitutional right. It must be granted. And once the bail has been granted, that's the end of the matter. The case will be heard next year or the year after, or after 1 year.
Recently, on February 12th, a man was arrested and detained after being found in possession of a python while crossing the Likoni Channel. What caught my eye about this case is not just about the arrest, but the swift dispensation of justice. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in jail or a fine of 1 million Kenya shillings. Nothing wrong about this, but questions were voiced on the disparity noted when wealthy and influential men and women find themselves on the wrong side of the law. Babu Owino gun case, Governor Obado in the late Sharon's murder case. The list goes on, not forgetting the numerous economic crime cases in the public domain still lagging in court. Does the system, the justice system, have a bias in favoring people from wealthy backgrounds? Are the big fish too big to be fried, while the small fish languish in remand and prisons for petty crimes? Is there an abuse of the legal process? That's the big story tonight. Thank you so much for making time. Welcome to the broadcast. I'm Jesse Rogers. Of course, let me take this opportunity to introduce our panelists, and I'll start with Kelvin Mogeni, who's already in studio. He's an advocate of the High Court, and he's the chairperson of the International Commission of Jurists right here in Kenya, as well as being a member of the Bail and Bond Terms Committee. Thank you so much, Mogeni, for making time. We'll get to interact with you later on during the broadcast. Right now, I'd like to introduce our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's having a brief discussion with the DPP, that's the Director of Public Prosecution, Noordin Haji. It would be interesting to get his take on this very sophisticated question: is justice for sale? Over to you, Sophia.
Good evening, Jesse. So there has been a perception, a growing perception about the criminal justice system in Kenya that it is skewed in the sense that it favors those who are wealthy, those who are rich, who can get a battery of lawyers, if you like, and condemns the poor. And you'll find they will get harsher sentences or terms when it comes to bail. Is it a reality, or is it just something some Kenyans have talked about off of some of the scenarios we've seen play out in the recent past? Well, let me talk this evening to a man who is part of that system, the criminal justice system in the country. That's the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji. Thank you for making time for us. I laugh because when I said part of the system, not the corrupt system, but of course the system as far as the criminal justice system. So let's begin with whether you agree with that sentiment. Those who hold the view that it is in fact skewed, it's not a balanced scale. Those who are poor get the short end of the stick.
I agree with that sentiment, and it's something that is, research has been done. It's been confirmed by the NCAJ, by our own offices, and other institutions that have carried research in Kenya about access to justice and how it favors those with means. Yeah.
So, because it has been confirmed, we had the CJ himself actually 2 years ago, it was, in the release of that report, talking about not only the poor, but the youth as well. In your view, what steps have been taken then to address this? Because if there's no redress and we know what is happening on the ground, then it appears this research is not helping much to address the situation as it stands.
Well, we've done quite a bit. To start with, I think last week we launched the bail and bond guidelines by the Chief Justice through the NCAJ, where we all meet and discuss issues of access to justice. And I think with that review, bail and bond will probably be more affordable, more accessible to all Kenyans. We've also, as ODPP, engaged in reviewing some of the decisions to charge. And trying to apply a number of tools that would try and decongest, but that would favor the less fortunate or the ones who cannot afford. And on that point, we've introduced the plea bargaining tools. We've introduced diversion as a means of decongesting, but we've also reviewed quite a number of bail and bond. And people who are in remand because they cannot afford. And we've worked through with the judiciary also and other individuals within the criminal justice system. Yeah.
Because you talk about that, and it is true that as we stand now, a large number of the people populating prisons in Kenya are poor. And even some would argue have no really business being in prison because the non-custodial aspect of meting out justice. So how far can we go to ensure that you don't have these people there and other measures are explored?
So, for example, us as ODPP, what we've done, and we've taken deliberate measures, especially when it comes to petty crimes, that really do not need to have people in custody or in remand. With that's why we've introduced, the diversion policy, where we're trying to divert people to other means and other ways of them either rehabilitating or asking them to report to the police every now and then, or just monitoring and evaluating. And we're trying to engage quite a number of other organizations to work with us so that we can, divert petty crimes away. Because really, those who are involved in petty crimes should not be in remand. And most of the time, quite a number of them are not even repeat offenders. The other thing that we've done is to up, our ability to collect data and store data, because one of the problems that we, and especially when I came from the office, I discovered is that we didn't have, records. We didn't have means of telling who's been in remand for how long. When we did the All for Justice program, for example, we found quite a number of people who've been in remand for 10 years. It's unacceptable. and simply because they could not be able to raise 100,000. And this is what we're trying now to put in place and have a criminal justice system and a case management system that can tell us who's where and alert us to to instances where it is unacceptable, or in instances where people have been incarcerated for too long without a proper review. Yeah.
Money talks, you've heard that. And there are those who feel in Kenya it really does talk. You'll find those who are rich, they're wealthy, they'll have lawyers, for instance, in one case, representing one person, 10, senior counsel and all others. But this poor woman or man can't even afford one to represent them. Yeah. And even for DPP, even with your counsel, when you're in matters, sometimes not largely outnumbered when you're with this more wealthier persons. How can this be addressed, sir?
Okay, this is not peculiar to Kenya. If you look to other jurisdictions and at other jurisdictions, the US, the UK, individuals who can afford will get a barrage of lawyers.
But legal aid there perhaps works better?
Well, yes, and that's another thing. Not only that, maybe the peculiarity and the difference in Kenya is, of course, corruption. This exacerbates everything and it complicates everything. So if you're wealthy, you can have a number of lawyers. You can throw in a judge or two. You can compromise a prosecutor and even the investigators. And this is where the difference is. And this is where things are amplified. And really, this is where, as a country, we need to address these issues and ensure that the playing field is level. And that's the argument that I've been putting across, that, individuals can argue that the prosecution is weak, but if you really look and put it under the microscope, it is corruption that is weakening the system, the whole system. And that's where we've come in, and we're trying to address that issue, that as much as we want to prosecute corruption, for example, corruption cases, it will not yield much if the system itself is skewed towards favoring those with means and money to buy their way out.
Yeah. And let's begin with your office. Is there a mechanism to self-interrogate and also put up mechanisms so that if and those who may be corrupted, the rotten tomatoes or potatoes in the system are nipped at the bud, so that you do not have this problem, because it's an entire system, as you said, it's not just one party.
Yeah. Okay, we as ODPP, I can talk about ODPP, we've put quite a number of measures in place. So prosecutors who are prosecuting corruption cases are thoroughly vetted, continuously put on the polygraph on periodic every 6 months or so. In addition, what we've done is we have a complaints unit. We have an internal compliance unit that investigates any complaints or any possible infractions that prosecutors are involved in. But in addition, we've opened ourselves to scrutiny by the audit of the Office of the Auditor General, EACC, and even DCI. We have introduced integrity programs and mentorship programs for prosecutors to just ensure that continuously they are reminded of the need to have integrity on what we are doing. But there's also continuous investigations and oversight. We have operationalized the inspectorate team, although we're in court because some individuals did not want it to take off. We have performance management systems that we've put in place. We have a very clear code of conduct. So we've put quite a bit in place to ensure that we have individuals of integrity prosecuting cases. Yeah.
And let's talk about public officials for a second, because it almost is one of those peculiar instances I find. Once they're charged in court and maybe remanded for some time pending a ruling on a bill, then they fall sick and they either will be special wing at Kenyatta, the private side, or are released. And that's, again, another double standard where you see how these people are treated and how ordinary Kenyans will be treated is not the same. The expediency for their matters and other ordinary people, it's not the same. What do you make of that?
No, that's very true. Sophia, I mean, if you look at most of the cases, and it's not to brag or anything, but since I took office, we've been very strict about that. Whether you look at the case of, for example, Sonko, when I'm sorry to mention names, but he didn't want to come, but we had to insist, and we insisted that he would have to appear in court. We've been very strict about individuals running to hospital and being taken to hospital, and the double standard that is applied therein. And as Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we've been very vocal in trying to refuse and resist that. However, of course, then the decision is really at that point with those who are in charge of putting people in custody, and it's not necessarily the ODPP. But we've been very strict, and of recent we've been arguing that there must be guidelines on how this can be applied. But it's not only that. For example, if you look at some of the rulings, and one case in point is, of course, the ridiculous bail ruling that was given that an individual can pay in installments. The purpose of bail and bond is to ensure that the accused appears in court. In this instance, if the money was to be applied to the victim, there's nothing compelling, really, nothing compelling the accused to go to court. He's actually out on free bond if you analyze it critically. And it's unacceptable. And these are the things we're saying that need to stop. Really, as much as, for example, the judiciary is independent and has discretion, but that must be applied in the public interest.
Yeah. And I remember on that case you indicated you would appeal on the terms which you did. But beyond the appeal, is there seeking also justice or perhaps recourse from the Judicial Service Commission as far as disciplinary action against the specific judicial officer?
Yes, and we've done that. But that's a whole other process that really needs to also be reviewed and looked into strictly, because as much as you apply and as much as you lodge your complaint, it takes ages for these cases to be brought forward and to be listened to, and this is another problem. There is a perception that is increasingly being felt that certain institutions are protecting their own, and that's another problem, which needs to be addressed.
So then would you agree with those who argue, for instance, for the JSC, when you talk about protecting their own, that perhaps its membership needs to have more outside the judicial officials themselves, so that perhaps there is more willingness, quote unquote, if you like?
Yeah, okay, still, you would still need members of the judiciary within it, but maybe decrease the number and bring more independent individuals that are not beholden to the judiciary. So, for example, if you have two LSK members sitting in there, a male and a female, some people might start thinking of their practice. How is this going to affect my practice if I make a certain decision? When you have representation, a number of representation from the magistrate level, from the High Court level, from the Court of Appeal, and from the Supreme Court, it skews. It becomes a little bit skewed. So what we are arguing and urging is that, it should be, yes, judiciary should be represented, but those numbers should be looked into and have a more robust representation that is less beholden to the criminal justice system, for example. Yeah.
And as we bring this to a close, still for a long time we saw as a big part of the debate was going on as to who really is to blame, who's dropping the ball. Focus, criticism was on the judiciary, and that it has been argued there still is corruption in that institution. I wonder whether you still think, even as it stands now in the entire chain, that is the weakest link.
Sophia, I think the weakness runs all through, and it will not be fair to just point to one. However, what we are asking is, as I said, for example, the JSC to be more robust in trying to settle some of the complaints that are out there, and also for them to allow prosecutors the discretion that they also enjoy under the Constitution. That the discretion is not only, or does not only lie with the judiciary, so that where we want to prosecute judicial officers who are corrupt, who are few but corrupt, we can do it without any hindrance. And if we're really unfair, it will come out in the case, because there will be a case that we will table. But we are asking for a level playing field, and we are asking that we should be allowed, irrespective of where an individual comes in or comes from, we should be allowed to prosecute without fear, favor, or interference, for that matter. Yeah.
I will say or ask this as we close. You said, when you got into office, that big fish, and in this conversation we are having, it really is that the smaller people, their justice is hard, it's expedient. For the big fish, they still either run around the system. So in your term, will we see some big fish really held to account?
I hope so. But as I've said, it requires quite a bit, including a level playing field, including all of us within the criminal justice system and the justice system agreeing to tackle corruption jointly. And you can't just have one arm doing it or two arms doing it and the rest are not.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Nuruddin Haji, the Director of Public Prosecution, saying he is still hopeful, optimistic that in fact for the blood that is sought to be seen, especially in as far as what we call big fish in this country, that will happen. But more importantly, expediency when it comes to justice across the board, so that the scales of justice are not seen to tilt against one part or class of society. Jesse.
Well, many thanks, Sophia Wanuna, right there having an informative discussion with the DPP, Nuruddin Haji. Of course, level playing field is one thing that is highlighted in terms of the quick and just dispensation of justice. And allow me to bring into the conversation at this particular point Kelvin Mugeni. As I mentioned earlier on, not only is he an advocate of the High Court, he is also the chair of the International Commission of Jurists and a member of the Bail and Bonds Term Committee. Mugeni, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for making time. Perhaps let me start with your quick reaction on what DPP Haji had to say about this particular topic. What say you?
I think what I can say is that the DPP and all the other justice sector players, they need to come together and join hands in fighting these issues, especially the question of corruption, the petty crimes, the persons who are or the suspected persons who believe that they are rich enough, they can't face justice. There are so many things that rise, on that, and I think there are many questions that arise. But it is good what you said about questions of bail. As a member of the committee, we did come up with a bail and bond bill, which we hope the Honourable Chief Justice will present it to Parliament, and it will bring uniformity so that we can avoid the questions that have been out there, and this an even way where the discretion has been exercised by judicial officers across the board, so that it is expected and anticipated that very soon we should be having an equal field where persons charged with similar offences and facing similar issues The bail terms will be set in a particular manner that should not, in any way bring any suspicion. Of course, that is a long process. Right now, you see, most of the issues have been left to the discretion of the judicial officers, the magistrates and judges who are handling these matters, and uniformity can never be there. And of course, what is most important is that he mentioned questions of petty crimes. As ICJ, we've been fighting to decriminalize petty offenses. That is, we should not focus on poverty as an issue to criminalize certain offenses. The Constitution has set out very clear provisions on anybody who's facing a charge, which is, the offense can be punished by a fine only, or where he's facing a term which is not exceeding 6 months. That person should not be put in custody. And of course, we expect that the police officer should be made aware of these provisions. And then we should not have a situation where persons who are facing that kind of offenses are incarcerated, and we fill the prisons and the police stations with that kind of persons. And of course, that is a good idea that he has said, that he is going to go out there, work with the judiciary, and ensure that these persons who are facing these petty or very low offenses should not be in custody or incarcerated. And I think it is a good discussion to have right now. But the biggest that I've heard him say is, how do you deal with the questions of corruption, not only in his office, because the corruption is not limited to the judiciary alone. It is also in his office. It is also involving other players in the process. There is corruption which starts from the investigative process, that is at the police station level. So we need to demystify this and ensure that the wheels of justice will move in a way that it doesn't create an impression that only the rich can be able to afford this process. And then in that way, we can also now instill that sense of responsibility, even in the citizenry themselves.
All right, Mugeni, allow me to take you back to basics at this particular point. I mean, you sit as a member of the Bail and Bond Committee, and I came earlier on, I came across Article 49(1)H, which says, an arrested person has a right to be released on bond or bail. But many Kenyans don't really know what the difference is between a bail or bond. Perhaps let me take you back. What exactly does it mean, a bail and a bond?
They more or less mean the same thing, only that bail refers to the monetary value, cash bail.
Okay.
And the bond refers to a security document that is attached to that, the bail terms. So you find somebody who has been charged can be released on cash bail of a particular amount, which can also be given at the police station level. And alternatively, can be given a security where somebody else can stand in for you. That person will stand as a bond surety. The bond surety means that you are able to be released by giving the logbook, a payslip, a land title deed, and second of things. And sometimes, you can sign your own personal cognizance where you can now attend without necessarily giving a cash or a security in terms of a bond. You can execute a personal bond. So the bond refers to several of those things that are not monetary. And the cash bail refers to the physical amount that is deposited either in court or at the police station level.
All right, Mugeni, thank you for that clarification. I'm sure we've understood that. But we want to take a short break right now. When we come back, we'll delve a little bit deeper, also taking a look at the process of deciding a stipulated bond or bail terms, because we've seen disparities. I mean, we've been recently highlighted in the media how Babu Owino was actually given a cash bail of 10 million that is payable in installments. And we've seen what the DPP had to say about this particular issue. So a lot more to discuss on this particular topic. Just stay with us. You're watching The Big Story. We'll be right back.